Welcome to the podcast editing and support show. My name is Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start the episode right now. Happy to have you here. Let's do this. Yeah, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have you back. Happy New Year. Happy all great things 2025. And we're going to talk a little bit about SEO and GEO. What's that? I did an episode of this over on the How to Podcast series. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. As always, you can come and listen to my other podcast about podcasting, where we bring on great co-hosts and we do Daily Daves and we do all kinds of great stuff in and around podcasting. Ooh, I used the name of one of my favorite shows there. In and around podcasting. And we share great stuff about podcasting. And you get to hear from some of the most amazing people in podcasting. That's the How to Podcast series. If you're interested, would love for you to come check that out as well. I did an episode around GEO versus SEO. Now, you're going to hear on every single podcast about podcasting or about marketing SEO, search engine optimization. Okay. Now, this is something that we've been hitting. We've been hitting this drum for so long that it's almost got to the point where it's like you could have a drink every time somebody says SEO on their podcast. You know what people are not talking about is GEO. What are you talking about? It's generative engine optimization. You know, those things like ChatGPT and my favorite perplexity.ai and on and on and on and on. While I'm recording this, there's new ones arriving on the scene as we speak. As you listen, there's another new one. And you know what it's doing? It's slowly inching out and devaluing Google. It's devaluing Google as the main hub where we go to for search and where we go to be found. And when you're building your business around podcasting and supporting podcasters and creatives, if you are focused solely on SEO and Google, then I want you to hear something that I came across over on TikTok, which by the time you're listening to this in the US, may or may not be actually available to you. It is for us here in Canada. So another reason why Canada's maybe a little bit better in this situation. But so I came across this from Gary Vee. I'm not a huge Gary Vee fanboy, but he does have some moments of brilliance in between pretty interesting vocabulary. But he does have these moments where he does something sparkles, and he does seem to have his finger on the pulse of what's happening in the creative space. So when he talked about this, it made me think of you and your business as you're creating something special to help people and turn your love of podcasting and editing and supporting podcasters into an actual business. There's something you might be missing, and that's what we're going to talk about here on the podcast. So here's the clip from Gary speaking at some kind of conference or an event, and I'll edit out the words that doesn't suit my podcast, and you'll hear exactly what he's talking about as he compares Google to ChatGPT and perplexity.ai, again, my favorite, my go-to. And hear the fact that as creators, as business owners, as people who want to get our information out to the world, that if you're solely dependent on Google, you are basically the equivalent of someone who was really good at the yellow pages in the phone book. Now, if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. We used to get these books would show up on your doorstep, and it would be the phone numbers and addresses of the people in your community. And then there would be these yellow pages, which would be advertisement pages. And you could look up a plumber or a restaurant or whatever. And it would be alphabetical. And that's why you'd see AAA plumber. So AAA plumber, that would mean they would be first on the list alphabetically under the category of a plumber. So that's kind of why those are there. So as we would get these books, and this would be our go-to, we'd put them by our phone, which was attached to a wall, and we would then have our complete list of phone book and all the people who live in our world. Great. So you're in the phone book, but that doesn't mean anybody can find you, right? We still have to know about you. And what I'm getting from Gary's talk here that I'm going to play for you in a second is that we are maybe focused on the wrong things in 2025 and that we need to be really diligent about where we want to spend the most time, effort, and our resources to grow our little business helping podcasters. So here's Gary's talk. Again, I'll jump in and we'll kind of review this together, but here's what Gary had to say about SEO versus GEO and how it's going to impact you as a business owner, as a podcaster. Here's Gary's thoughts.
How many people here really use Google? It's a real driver of their business. Raise your hands. Actually, stand up. We could call it pretty much the room. Relies on Google. Does everybody understand that Google search is fundamentally dead within the next 7 years? That everyone's going to AI? That ChatGPT just wiped out this entire room?
Wow. So AI tools wiped out that entire room. All those people gathered to hear Gary talk about this topic. And they've built their world on something that's going to be changing drastically in the next few months, years. Wow. He goes on with more.
Everybody who just stood up just told me that the yellow pages is their life. This whole room just stood up and is reliant on a platform that is getting massively disrupted right in your face right now. How many people here are already using ChatGPT or Perplexity instead of Google for things they used Google for just 2 years ago? Raise your hand.
So that's me, my hands up. I've been so focused on Google for so long for my little small business that my wife and I have and podcasting and all of that. But again, go back to Google and do another search again. If you haven't been there recently, and just look at the results that come back to you. Primarily, the top of the list are all sponsored posts. Somebody paid money to be the top of the search result. You'll see if you go search Buzzsprout or Captivate.fm or any of these other hosting sites, you're going to see the competition advertising on that search. And you have to kind of scroll through a few entries before you actually find what you were actually searching for, because everyone else is stealing each other's search. And it's become a pay-to-play model, just like Facebook is a pay-to-play, just like Instagram is a pay-to-play, just like TikTok, right? All these platforms are bringing you in as a free resource where you can build community, build content, and then just the time when things get good, they switch to more of a, well, if you want people to see, you need to pay. And that's exactly what's happening in Google. Now, when you go to AI, for me, it's perplexity.ai. That's my go-to. I do like the sourcing that it gives you. I like all of that information. Again, I cover all this in my How to Podcast series where I talk about SEO versus GEO. But what I like about Perplexity is it gives you the results without it being something that's more like Google, which is sponsored paid results. Okay? So when people have bad experiences around something, they generally tend to leave and go somewhere else. And what happens to the platform then? Right? So if you're building your world on the sand that is called Google, as much as I love Google, I use Google every day, but when it comes to search, Google hasn't changed its ways to reflect what's happening in this AI world that we're in. And I fear that those who don't embrace and move forward with the options available, you're going to get left behind. As Gary's saying in this talk, you're going to get left behind. You're going to be struggling to be found on a platform that people don't use. Right? So Gary continues with more.
I think we can all agree that the people raising their hands, I'm not talking to a junior high, 40, 50, 60-year-olds are raising their hands and they are using AI now instead of Google. Don't sit here and do what all of you do, which is put your head in the sand when a wave comes. Go find your surfboard and ride that wave. This has happened. This whole room just stood up that Google search is a dominant force in their business, and in 48, 50, 66 months, that behavior will be gone. Very hard to click a Google ad when you don't even go to Google in the first place.
So I'm seeing search transforming from being a function to being more of a companion, where you can have a conversation with an AI tool in a search that you really can't have in the traditional Google search world. So again, that's why I like Perplexity. So what I'm seeing is AI search is changing how we look for information online. Instead of typing keywords into Google and everything you're going to hear in any podcast about podcasting or growing a business or content creation, SEO, keywords. People are still yelling that from the rooftops right now. And nobody's talking about this new world. And that's why I'm so glad I found this clip from Gary Vee. Everyone's talking keywords. And that's how you're going to be found in Google. Well, we're going to be able to ask questions of our search instead of looking for keywords. And this is really going to shake things up for websites and businesses trying to be found online. So what's likely to happen from my research is that fewer people are going to use traditional search engines for simple questions like Google. Websites might get less traffic from search engines. High quality, helpful content will become even more important. That's why your podcast needs to be out there. And search results will be more personalized for each user. You and I can do the exact same search and get different results because it's based on who we are and how we go into the platform, how we navigate the platform, our history, right? It's like Netflix recommending something to you because you watched it, Spotify recommending things to you because you listened to it. Search is going to start listening to you and giving you what you would want and giving someone else a completely different experience. But in that, we want to be found. Doesn't matter who's searching, we want them to find us. So here's some thoughts. If you're a content creator or a business owner, here's what you can do as we look towards a world that Gary's talking about. Less Google, more Perplexity or ChatGPT. Create really good in-depth content that answers people's questions. The name of my podcast about podcasting is called the How To Podcast Series, and I use that name on purpose because people go into Google or Perplexity or ChatGPT and they write How To Podcast. So there you go. And with over 500 episodes, there's plenty of content to feed the algorithm behind the scenes that is searching for the best possible result for that person's inquiry. Okay, so there's a lot of great content there for anyone to find. So I'm feeding the algorithm behind the scenes just by the sheer amount of content that I have. So if you have 5 episodes, give it some time. You're going to need to build in a little bit more depth of content before you can really leverage this to the fullest extent of what these tools can do for you. Also, write what you do in a way that sounds natural. Like you're answering someone's question. Instead of just stuffing keywords down your searcher's throat. Okay, it's not about how many keywords you can list in the name of your podcast title, in your show notes, but you're actually writing in a way that sounds natural and human. That's one thing you really need to start working on and thinking about as you build your business around podcasting. And then make your information clear and easy to understand. Make sure you're not using inside terms or things that need to be explained or searched further. Real clear, easy to understand. Show that you are the expert in your field. Now, there are so many podcasts about podcast editing. There's so many podcasts about podcasting. How will I ever show and demonstrate that I'm an expert? It's going to be in the sheer quantity of what I'm putting out. It's going to be in the quality of what I'm putting out, the connections I make through podcasting and featuring them and then them featuring myself. All those things get mashed together into one big, nice mix, which the search engines and search AI will be looking for. Keep your content organized so that AI has a way to go through it in a proper way and keep learning about all these new AI technologies. And be ready to change your approach as new technologies come out. Again, while I'm recording this, a new technologies already just came out today. So you need to be on the edge of that. And as a podcast editing and support person, you can be that resource to a busy podcaster who doesn't have time to do this legwork, doesn't have time to go behind the scenes and see how everything's working. You can be their go-to person to help them be found in a search AI world in place of, eventually, a Google search world. So by doing these things, you're going to have a better chance of your content and your business being seen and used by AI search engines, which is going to help you stay visible online as technology will continually change and adapt to what the searchers want, not so much what the content creators want. So the searchers are leading the charge. They are going to dictate and dominate what is going to happen in the world of search. Not you as a content creator, as a business, as a podcaster. Your world is not going to shape how people search. The people searching are going to shape your world on how you create your content and how you share it with the world. So, go back to what Gary said. Are you one of those people that have built your whole sandcastle on this thing called Google search? What has his warnings to you meant so that you can now think about, well, in a world of AI, where maybe you or I might not be as familiar with it, am I missing an opportunity? Am I putting myself behind by simply not catching up and staying in touch with what's happening in the space? So I would encourage you to be on board and to listen and learn and seek out podcasts that talk about these topics and avoid some of the traditional speech around the historical way on how we've been using Google through SEO and keywords, and understand there's a whole new world coming where you are going to need to talk more like a person who's searching for an answer, forming your podcast episodes, your business, your website around answering the questions that people are asking and giving great results in every answer so that people will come to you and you will be one of those searches that pops up. I did a search around a topic that I had talked about a long time ago, and to my great surprise on Perplexity, it gave me back results. It gave me back notations and websites that talked about that. And one of the things it gave me was an audio link to my podcast episode that I've done over a year ago, because it had the details in the title and in the description and in the content that answered the questions I asked in Perplexity. It gave me back my own content, and I was in an incognito window, which means I doesn't really keep track of who I am and my search history. It gave me back my content as a result, which made me feel really happy. But now I got to do more to stay on top of that. So if you have questions about this, you just want to nerd out about it and talk about it, jump over to the website. I would love to chat with you and talk about your business as well. I'm always looking for podcast editors and support people who want to come on and talk about their business. Come on the show. Let's have a chat about your business, how you're growing it, how you started, who you help, who you serve, and maybe even we can talk about SEO versus GEO. I'd be really curious to get your thoughts about this as well. So I'll have a link in the show notes for my episode for the How to Podcast series, where I talked about SEO versus GEO. I'd love for you to go check that out as well. Thank you for listening to the show, and looking forward to a great 2025 and staying on board and on task with many great episodes to come. Thank you so much for being here, and Happy New Year. Thanks for listening to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. Visit us at podcasteditingandsupport.com, podcasteditingandsupport.com. We would love to help you find a great podcast editor, or if you want to hire us, we would love to work with you. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.